Morning everyone. I am Aarti Muzumdar from the Department of English, MS University, Baroda. Say.
Hello everyone, I am Swarna Bharti from Department of English, MS University as well.
Today we have brought to you a lesson on active listening. It's divided into two parts in the sense that we'll do a little of theory and then we will work out some exercises with you all. Okay. Now first let me tell you that listening is a very important activity, and I would say a very neglected activity because we take listening for granted. Yeah. But unfortunately there's a problem in the sense that so many times there is a miscommunication between the listener and the speaker because of not responding in a proper manner, and therefore we feel that listening is a very important activity which needs to be undertaken in the classroom. So let us begin first by understanding the difference between hearing and listening. Now if we look at the environment, we see a lot of different sounds that come into our hearing. In fact, we say that we hear sounds from everywhere. We hear the sounds of a fan in the classroom, we hear the sounds of the whirring noises from outside, we hear the sounds of the motorbikes or the transport, but each and every sound does not get registered in our mind. There is no understanding at all of these sounds. We do not understand. So what happens is that only certain sounds get understood, and therefore listening involves a lot of understanding. Listening involves the understanding of those sounds depending upon the previous knowledge. And can you Bharti?
We have to differentiate between hearing and listening. Hearing, as madam said, we hear so many sounds in our surroundings and everything doesn't get registered, and because the ear is an involuntary organ, we keep hearing all kinds of sounds. So basically hearing is the sound waves that we keep receiving, the eardrum keeps receiving. They are all the sound patterns that we keep hearing in our surroundings, but we may or we may not register them, we may or we may not understand all the sounds. But therefore hearing is different from listening. So ma'am, would you like to say something about what is listening and how it is different from hearing?
Yeah, let us now go a little deeper into the complex process of listening. What is this complex process? Now if you see on the slide, you can see that the listening process involves 4 stages. The first process involves the listening of all the sounds. In fact, when all these sounds, our mind is very, very blank, and therefore our mind incorporates in itself a lot of sounds. But then there is a mental filter in our mind which identifies the sensical sounds from the nonsensical sounds. When I mean sensical sounds, I mean those sounds which actually can be identified, can be placed in a sound pattern, can be placed in a structure according to a context, and that is how slowly we start identifying those sensical sounds. Now what happens to the nonsensical sounds? The nonsensical sounds are stored in one part of our mind, and they are let out or they go out of the mind in the form of verbal garbage. Now these sounds which are sensical and which are stored in our mind, they are stored in the form of mental representations. And these mental representations we retrieve from our mind, then these are decoded for meaning, decoded for the understanding of what the speaker has to say. And along with these sensical sounds, in fact, we also look at the non-verbal cues which the speaker is sending to us. And ultimately, what happens is we evaluate these sound patterns, we accept it if it appeals to our mind. If we understand it, we accept it. Otherwise, we are confused with those sounds, we are confused with those words, and if the message is a confused message, then we seek clarification. And once we are still, if we are not satisfied with those meanings, then we reject it totally. Now, Bharti, can you tell us about in which situations, if we go, what type of listening are there?
Yeah, various types of listening. Depending on how we listen and depending on where we are, in what kind of situation we are, there are various types of listening. The very first one, as you can see on the slide, is the passive listening, which is as good as hearing, where the listener or the receiver is mentally absent and you are just receiving the sound waves from the surrounding. The sound patterns are being received, but you don't actually register anything. Then we have what is called marginal listening.
Can I just interrupt you, Bharti? Can you give us an example of the passive for our students?
Yeah.
What type of passive listening are you talking about?
Passive listening is you might be just standing at the railway station and you hear the sound of the train coming and the passengers moving around, and you can hear the tea stall fellow shouting.
Right.
And there are the people who are vendors, snack vendors, who are calling out to various passengers in the trains to buy the snacks that they are out to sell.
Yes.
So you hear all kinds of sounds, and you may choose to pay attention to something or you may not. Actually, in passive listening, we are not paying attention to all those sounds which are there in our surrounding.
Okay.
So it's a kind of where the receiver is mentally absent.
Okay.
So the next one that we have, the type of listening, is marginal listening. In marginal listening, superficial kind of listening takes place. A very good example of it is the students in the classroom situation.
Yes, absolutely.
Where usually marginal listening takes place if the topic that is under discussion is very boring, or if it is very complex and it's a monotonous kind of presentation. So or if the receiver is very tired, so the receiver's mind behaves like a fluctuating bulb.
Yes.
The bulb fluctuates when there is a low voltage situation in our house. So our mind works like that, and what actually the listener does is only receives chunks of information or the chunks of message. You don't have the complete, you are not receiving the complete message, you are receiving just bits of the message. So in that sense, it is a partial or a superficial kind of listening. And as I said, the best example is our students in the classroom.
So this also means that listening is not consistent,
Yes.
It is in parts. Okay.
It is in parts. And then we have the next type, as you can see on the slide, that's projective listening. And when communication takes place, when communication starts, there is an effort both on the part of the sender, that is the speaker, in this case speaker, and the receiver, that is the listener, and each one tries to understand each other in a general context. So in projective listening, what happens is the listener is more concerned about his or her point of view. The listener tries to understand only from his or her frame of reference or within his or her context. So the listener is not actually paying attention to the context in which the speaker is communicating. So in that sense, it's a projective kind of listening. It is a one-sided listening.
So this also means that the listener may not understand what the speaker is trying to,
the
intention of the speaker, because the listener is listening only from his or her own point of view.
Yeah. So, ma'am, can you suggest an example for projective listening?
Yeah, I would also say that, take for example, a teacher is trying to, another classroom situation where a teacher is trying to make herself understand what is a project work or what he or she wants the students to do, but the student is unable to understand and submits a project from his own point of view. So which definitely means that the listener has not understood, the student has not understood the teacher's point of view, or he or she is trying to look at that particular topic from his point of
His
view.
or her point of view. Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. Okay.
And what about sensitive listening? What is it?
Yeah, that's the next type of listening. As has already been pointed out, that listening is much more complex than hearing, and it is complex because there are certain levels to it. There are certain stages that you need to undergo when you are listening. So sensitive listening is basically where you are undergoing all those stages. At the first place, there is an effort to understand the speaker's intended message. That is, the listener is trying to make a context with the speaker. There is an effort to understand what the speaker wants to say
Yes.
through his or her communication. So that is sensitive listening. In a way, it is a good kind of listening, active type of listening. But we may say that the next type of listening, that is active listening, is the best of its kind, because in active listening, the speaker and the receiver, especially the listener, is not only forming a context with the
Correct.
speaker,
Yes.
but there is also an effort to interact.
Yes.
There is the listener takes an initiative to make it clear whether he or she has understood the intended message of the speaker. There is always a effort on the part of the listener to interact with the speaker and clarify doubts, to clarify any kind of confusion and seek more information.
Okay.
If the listener has something to say or add to the information that the speaker has already
Okay.
given, the listener also discusses or would like to share the extra information with the speaker.
Okay.
So
Can we go a little more deeper into active listening? Because I think active listening takes place every time, everywhere, for all of us.
yeah.
Because whatever we are doing, whatever we are responding to, it is because of the active listening that we are undertaking. Say, for example, who is an active listener? If we can characterize an active listener, we'll come to know that the active listener is a one who understands the speaker thoroughly. In the sense, he understands what the speaker is trying to tell him. He also understands the gestures and the postures that the speaker is saying. And as you rightly pointed out, that if the listener is unable to understand anything, he questions or she questions, seeks for clarification if required, and tries to understand the speaker's intent. So, active listener is a person who totally understands the message which the speaker is trying to convey. And I think more importantly, as you rightly pointed out, Bharti, listener is an active participant in the communication process.
Yes.
That means he or she can respond in an appropriate manner to the appropriate context in which the speaker is speaking. So, can you add something to that, Bharti? Or
Yeah. If it is a face-to-face kind of a conversation that is going on, that is, if the listener can see the speaker, it's not only the verbal communication that's important, it's even the non-verbal communication, like for example the gestures, the facial expressions, eye contact,
Yes.
the body language of the speaker. Everything communicates something. So an active listener pays attention to both the verbal as well as the non-verbal cues that the speaker is exhibiting, and both of them equally help in the complete understanding or absorption of the message, apart from the participation that the interaction, the interest in interaction that the listener shows maybe at the end of the whole discussion.
correct.
So that is how active listening takes place.
Okay.
And active listening takes place in various situations.
Yeah.
So let's look at in what situations we have active listening. As if you look at the slide, we have there are innumerable situations, but there are three specific ones into which they can be categorized. As you can see on the slide, the first type of situation is the informal situations, listening in informal situations. For example, you may be talking to strangers, you may be talking to your relatives, you may be asking for information or giving information. Like for example, you might have gone to the railway station and you are talking to the the clerk,
Yes.
the railway clerk, asking about the timings of the trains, which are
Yes.
whether they are on schedule or are they delayed, etc. And you keep listening to announcements at the bus stations,
Right.
railway stations,
Yes.
and even the airport also. So
What about instructions which the teacher gives in the classroom?
yeah,
Is it
even-
is it an informal situation?
actually, yes, it should be formal,
Formal.
but then, yeah, the kind of listening that the students choose to do.
Yes, and another thing is that we develop a rapport with our students, that it becomes an informal situation, Understanding the instructions of the teacher in the classroom also is an informal situation because of the rapport that is developed between the teacher and the
Yeah,
student.
in fact, the students understand better when there is a rapport between the teacher
Yes.
and the student, and if it's an informal situation, it becomes more a friendly kind
Friendly,
of conversation
yes,
and
definitely.
interactive classroom.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, the next type of situation that we have are the formal situations. Formal situations can be interviews where you need to pay complete attention to the questions which are being asked by the interviewers so that you are able to give
Yes.
correct responses to the questions. They can be meetings in a professional situation when there is some discussion going on, because meetings are highly formal situations where they are discussing some kind of problem that they need to
Yes.
solve, or it can be some important decision that they need to make. So every listener in a meeting has to pay